Hello to everyone out there. I'm Poetic Heretic, and tonight I have an interesting article for you from Mysterious Universe regarding the phenomenon of the women in black. It is called Profiling the Women in Black, Connected to the Men in Black? Yes, by Nick Redfern. Quite often I get asked if the women in black and the men in black are interconnected. The answer is yes, they definitely are linked. There's no doubt about that. Having written a full-length book on the women in black, I know for sure this is a real worldwide phenomenon. With that said, let's have a look at some of the most creepy cases. In the 1930s, a terrifying WIB haunted the Bender family of Bridgeport, Connecticut. It so happens that a certain Albert Bender of that very same clan near single-handedly began the Men in Black mystery. In the early 1950s, Bender, after establishing the International Flying Saucer Bureau, was visited and threatened with nothing less than death by a trio of pale, skinny, fedora-wearing MIB. They were visits which firmly set the scene for the decades of MIB-themed horror and mayhem that followed. Bender's visitors were not secret agents of government, however. He said they materialized in his bedroom, a converted attic in a creepy old house of psycho proportions, amid an overpowering stench of sulfur. It's surely not a coincidence that the Bender family was terrorized by the MIB and women in black too. Moving on, in the 1960s, the WIB turned up in the small city of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and right around the time that sightings of the legendary flying monster known as Mothman were at their height. Claiming to be quote-unquote census takers, these pale-faced, staring-eyed WIB practically forced their way into the homes of frightened witnesses to Mothman. What began as seemingly normal questions about the number of people in the house, of the average income of the family, and of the number of rooms in the relevant property soon mutated into something much stranger. Persistent and intrusive questions about strange dreams, about unusual telephone interference, and about beliefs regarding the world of all things of a paranormal nature soon followed. In early 1987, Bruce Lee, a book editor for Morrow, had an experience with a WIB-type character in an uptown New York bookstore. Lee's attention to the curious woman, short, wrapped in a wool hat and a long scarf, and wearing large black sunglasses behind which could be seen huge, mad dog eyes, was prompted by something strange and synchronistic. She and her odd partner were speed reading the pages of the then newly published UFO-themed book Communion by Whitley Strieber. It was a book published by the very company Lee was working for. Lee quickly exited the store, shaken to the core by the appearance and hostile air that the peculiar pair oozed in his presence. The WIB, realizing when they had been rumbled, made hasty exits, and always before law enforcement personnel were on the scene. In his book, Walking Among Us, David Jacobs says that some quote-unquote ET hybrid are described as looking sickly and as having extremely smooth and very pale skin, just like the women in black. Jacobs talks about a hybrid being, quote, greatly overdressed for the summer and his slicked-down hairstyle was wrong, end quote. That, too, is reminiscent of so many WIB and MIB reports. Both often arrive at the homes of witnesses in vintage black cars. Jacobs describes how the hybrids are specifically taught to drive. The hybrids are often described as wearing wigs, and particularly so female hybrids who wear their fake hair black and long. Now, let's take a look at the account of Dan Sheldon, a factory worker from Cleveland, Ohio. Sheldon, in 1985, contacted the late Bud Hopkins, a noted abduction researcher and the author of Missing Time, about an experience which occurred in 1969. It all went down when he, Sheldon, was out in nearby Cleveland woods with several friends. Vague memories of a huge object hanging in the sky, a blinding light that lit up the trees, and a vanished period of about an hour of time were the staple parts of the story. Clearly, something significant occurred, but what? 2 months after contacting Hopkins, Sheldon visited him in New York, where hypnosis was used to try and secure yet more data from Sheldon's subconscious. It was a session that worked almost too well. A traumatic story surfaced of Sheldon being taken on board a UFO by a group of small, frightening-looking creatures, and then being subjected to distressing medical procedures, including the collection of samples of Sheldon's sperm. Other earlier accounts surfaced too, suggesting that Sheldon was very possibly a lifelong abductee. But particularly fascinating was a quote-unquote dream that Sheldon had just a couple of months before he and Hopkins met. As Sheldon told the story to Hopkins, he was in bed in the early hours and suddenly found himself wide awake. Standing in the thick shadows at a distance of around 20 feet was a trio of large-headed, emotionless humanoids with black eyes and dressed all in black. Then, as if out of nowhere, the face of a human-looking woman loomed into view. It was a chilling sight for Sheldon. The malevolent-looking woman had long black hair which swung or blew wildly in Sheldon's face. In addition, she had dark eyes and, rather oddly, no teeth. Sheldon was terrified, but he admitted that although the woman gave off an air of evil, she looks pretty too. Her eyes make her look evil, ugly eyes. They were pretty horrendous eyes, all black and shiny, blacker than hell. End quote. As Sheldon stared upwards at the woman and frozen to the core with fear, she mounted him and he soon ejaculated. Interestingly, Sheldon suspected the black-haired and black-eyed woman was far from pleased with the result, something which he suggested may have been because he had had a vasectomy post the 1969 encounter, effectively rendering him sterile. As all of the above demonstrates, the WIB are just as active and as dangerous as the MIB. Interesting. So in multiple accounts here, according at least to this article, it seemed that they were interested in collecting some kind of genetic samples or sperm samples that were not as the result of having a vasectomy or whatever. So interested in human reproduction for some reason, apparently. So that is the article, dear viewers. I hope you enjoyed. I'm not sure I have much to say about this. When I first heard of this idea a number of years ago of the women in black, I thought, I don't know, it just sounds a little too bizarre to me. Like, you hear these stories about the so-called men in black, and that's strange and unnerving enough. But then the idea of women in black, I kind of thought at first, oh, that almost just sounds like someone just made that up. But then you actually start looking into it, and there's a lot of alleged stories of encounters with them. Now, I'm not saying that anything is true or false one way or another. I'm just saying that these stories are out there, and there are people who claim to have encountered not only the sinister alien-like men in black, but also their feminine counterparts, the so-called women in black. I'm Poetic Heretic. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe if you have not already, and I will see you next time.